Hi, this is on Imagination with the Healing Garden, Shifting Perspectives. I just recorded part one of the depression loop. It is going to be uploaded to YouTube here shortly. But for now, I am just going to go ahead and continue the work, and you can go back later and rewatch the other one if you need to. So my depression loop basically is this. This is how I've broken it down. There's basically two types of cycles happening. And if you are new to my channel, I am a philosopher, sociologist, psychologist of 30 years. So this is pretty much what we're doing is there is this ongoing logic loop that occurs with depression. It's not like any other mental illness. It's completely different, which is why I haven't been able to figure it out until now, is because there's a lot more happening with it. It's like an emotional civil war on the self, and where you become the abuser and the enabler all in one, and it literally traps you in a logic loop. Now, we all thought that it was just like this cycle like this, but it's not. There's two parts to it, which is why substance abuse, addiction, self-harm, and binge eating, self-cutters experience this. God, I hate all these labels. It's so gross. It's okay. So people who seek escape or respite in substance abuse, self-harm, and food, all of that is basically part of it. And that's one part of it. That's over there. That's the addiction side of it. But that is caused from the self-loathing aspect. The other side is the actual depression itself. It's the grief of the self. So you've got a lot. It's a massive network that's happening here. And basically this loop over here fuels this loop over here. And then you kind of get out the gumption to go do this one again, but then it cycles back. Now, you also have grief playing a part of this. You have literally in grief, you're grieving the self. You have an intolerance for your own humanity and limitations. You have an intolerance. That's basically your perfectionism. That's your self-perfectionism. So you have an intolerance to your own limitations. You basically you doubt your ability to learn. That's another huge part of it, is that's the logical fallacy. You don't believe you can learn. Now, this goes back to the logical fallacy. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And that's bullshit. That is not true, because that assumes that the human being never grows, learns, or changes. So it's bullshit. Logical fallacy. So for the first time in my life, I disagree with Mark Twain. So you have that going on. So here's how it is. You basically have this concept of I can't do it. And then you have a logical fallacy, whereas it's that, well, I haven't succeeded in the past, so I'm not going to succeed in the future. You then fail, and you use the failure as a proof of concept. And that's the problem. You use the failure as a proof of concept. Now, I am certain that is where it's going to be the link out. And I will explain that in a moment. So you use the failure. Hold on a minute. Yes, I want to save this. I want to choose a new location. We're going to put this on my desktop. Choose. And we're going to save it on my desktop. I'm going to upload this to YouTube here shortly. This is the video. Okay. And today at 12:06. Excellent. Okay. I don't understand what the problem is. It's like, okay, yeah, that's where I want it. All right, I think that's pretty much it. It's ready to get uploaded. So I'm going to go ahead and upload part one now. Yes, I am doing it right here, right now. That's correct. All right. There it is. All right, that's beautiful. Okay, so yeah, this is phenomenal. And this is going to be Depression Explained, for Depression Broken Down, part one. All right, this makes me very happy. All right, so the video is processing. So we'll have that here shortly so you can see exactly how this starts. Yes, I'm doing this right here with you, and that's okay. All right, so to continue it, here's what we're looking at. All right, so that's now uploading. So after the proof of concept, people who suffer from depression go right into, they use the failure as a proof of concept. See, I failed again. That just reaffirms that I'm a loser. So then they get into the self loathing. They have self disappointment. Disappointment. Self, and this is the intolerance for their own inhumanity. They have no tolerance. And this is because they lack the first perspective. That's what that is. The first perspective kicks on. So the first one is basically the second perspective doesn't occur, the lack of resources. They have the inability to see their own resources. And then when they fail, they default to that first perspective, where the first perspective is, see, I'm not capable. They don't know how to manage or self regulate. So they immediately default to a lack of forgiveness, lack of compassion, and self-loathing. That then draws them into the next loop of feeling discouraged hopelessness, which is actually right here, discouraged hopelessness. They feel trapped, out of control, and now in addition to feeling no control, that's where they have anxiety, and that is where they experience shutdown, and that fuels their hopelessness. So they are trapped and out of control. And to cope, they escape. This is where the substance abuse, they eat or they cut themselves. Addiction to escape. Now, this is a dirty little thing that their mind does, that depression minds do, is they associate dreams and imagination with pain. So, because they lack the first perspective, they kill their dreams, they kill their dreams, they kill their imagination, so they can't dream. That destroys, in turn, their motivation. So they continue to basically toggle between addiction, escape, feeling worthless, feeling useless, and having no motivation. Now, if they manage to pull themselves out of that, they will then, and there's like this period of hope. And this is this right there. There is this period of hope where they come out of it. And when they come out of it, they go, okay, I can do it this time. They might be able to psych themselves up. So right there, it's when they psych themselves up that they're able to try again. And I noticed he gets into the pattern of try again. And I know what that is. That is our secret sauce right there. That's the ticket out, because that's when you need radical difference. So they try again, and they go in already with those tapes running. You can't do it. You can't do it. You failed before. You're going to fail again. They go in. They can't do it. They manifest that. Second perspective kicks on. I have no resources. I don't know what I'm doing. Illogical fallacy. They remind themselves, oh yeah, the past predictor is the best predictor. The past behavior is the best predictor for future behavior. Look at that. I failed again. There's more proof of concept. I can't believe I did it again. I do believe it again because I'm a failure. I hate myself. The self-loathing begins. It falls back to that first perspective again. And then they go back into feeling discouraged. They repeat right into the depression. Everything kicks right back around, and they try again. So it's this constant, the actual cycle of them trying, and then the failure, the resorting back to that first perspective, and then they have the discouraging. That's where the addiction loop comes in with the anxiety and the shutdown, the stonewalling occurs, and then they sink into a deeper depression, and then they try and pull themselves out of it. The only respite and reprieve they have are the short little things they do in their life. They need radical difference. So we're looking at the solution now. There's two different ways. God, this is a rat's nest. Of all the mental illnesses, this is a rat's nest. Borderline personality disorder was so much easier than depression. Narcissism is easier than this. Depression is a nightmare. Now, is this a mental illness? No, it's not. I don't see a mental illness here. I don't believe it's a mental illness. This is civil war. This is literally a mental civil war of the self declared upon the self, where the self is both. This is codependence, by the way. This is codependence. This is mental codependence. This is when you have yourself being both the abuser and the enabler. And it's right here in this part. That's when you become the abuser. And then over here, you become your own enabler. And then over here, you become your own abuser again. So you're literally playing both sides of the codependent cycle in your own mind over and over again. It is self-codependence. Yeah. Which means they have to be treated like both the abuser. They project. Interesting. They internalize their own failures and they project their own failure onto themselves. Wow. Will he let me do it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's in shutdown. I am pretty sure he is in shutdown. Yeah, that's his other defense. Oh, I'm going to get through to this. See, I have it too. I have depression too. And pills don't work. No, I have depression too. And the reason why I haven't been able to get over, I can pull myself out of my depression, but it's hard because this is my first time breaking it down. See, every time I listen to traditional therapy, it fucks it up because it's wrong. And this is why. So they told me that it was a mental illness. So I went, okay, well, then I'll get rid of it. They also told me that imagination was a mental illness. They told me that imagination was dissociation. No, it's not. So he has dissociation. Dissociation is part of it. In fact, dissociation is a mental numbing shutdown. It's literally self-loathing is a huge part of it. Now we have mindset. Of course, mindset is playing a massive role in this. So mindset is a factor. Now I'm going to need like a whiteboard for this. So mindset is definitely a massive factor. Okay, let's take a look at my cognitive core chart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we have beliefs. And we have I'm going to put a little heart for imagination, identity, and dreams. God, I really want to put him through this, but I don't think he's going to let me. Maybe he will. Now we have the ethics. He lacks the ethics. He lacks the first and the second ethic completely. He cannot self-regulate. Anyone with depression cannot self-regulate. Anyone with addiction cannot self-regulate. That's the problem. They don't know how to self-regulate. And then when you have depression, you also lack resources. So he has a significant loss of the first and the second perspective. Now, in fact, this is my problem. It keeps coming back to, I don't know how to change. I don't know how to change. I don't know how to change. And it's because we don't know what to do that's different. We don't know how to implement something that's different. And then we have the beliefs. Now, the beliefs is what fuels, literally. Beliefs fuel the mindset. The beliefs fuel the imagination, gives you hope. The ethics give you direction and confidence and awareness and knowledge and skills. That all comes off of the ethics. The self mindset gives you awareness. It gives you hope. It gives you motivation. This is how I know things. This is exactly it. Knowing which emotions come from where immediately tells me where people are missing what. And then this is why. This is how. So if you are not solid on knowing who you are, if you don't have yourself defined, you're not going to be aware. You're not going to be motivated. You're not going to have hope. You are not going to have confidence. You are not going to have direction in life. So if somebody doesn't know where they're going, it's because they lack who they are. If you lack ethics, you don't have direction, you don't have confidence, you don't have awareness, you lack your skills, and you lack your knowledge. Beliefs give you your mindset. They reaffirm your knowledge of right and wrong. They are your navigation. Your naming reaffirms who you are, in a summary. And then that final result is your perspective. Your perspective is built off of all four of those things. But your imagination and then your perspective literally fuels more of who you are. So it's like the self reaffirmation. It's literally a cycle. I have it in a 5 box, but it's really a loop. So that it's more of a star. It's really more of a star. So it's more like you have your identity, your imagination, which then fuels your ethics, leads to your ethics, which leads to your beliefs, which leads to your naming, which forms your perspective, which fuels your imagination, which fuels your ethics, which fuels your beliefs. So it really does this circle thing. That's really what it's doing. And it just keeps looping it around. Now, if you contaminate any part of this, and you can, if you contaminate the love part, the identity part, that gives you borderline, that gives you codependence, and that gives you narcissism. That's where that comes from. And if you compromise the perspective, that gives you Stockholm syndrome and psychological entrapment. And if you take out the ethics, that gives you depression. See how this works? And if you use abuse, the fear system, let me think here, for PTSD, that's just your safety. If you take out your identity, that gives you PTSD. You have to take out the defense system. That's what that is. The defense system goes away with PTSD, or the defense system, when the defense system goes away, you end up with PTSD. And when you end up with see, beliefs, if someone takes away your beliefs, and that's how they get in, they go in through your beliefs. So the beliefs lead to Stockholm syndrome and psychological entrapment. Bipolar is just toggling between two different perspectives. Bipolar, in my opinion, bipolar doesn't exist. It really doesn't. Every case that I've seen, it is just like you're just toggling. Borderline codependence, narcissism. We call it empaths, but really, borderline personality disorder is empath, and it is narcissistic abuse syndrome. That's being an empath. It's really borderline personality disorder, which is the flip side of narcissism. So when you are codependent, you have a narcissist or a borderline. You have someone who internalizes and someone who's a narcissist. That's it. That is it, exactly. So you either have borderline or narcissism. That's it. And two of them together create codependency. So if you are basically when you have depression and addiction, that is taking out both the first and the second, but it's when the self attacks it. It's when it goes internalized. So then you end up with literally both borderline personality disorder and you become your own narcissist. Literally, you become your own narcissist. And you end up having that borderline narcissistic, and they're both internalizing inside of you. You are internalizing both sides inside of you. And that's where you end up with this codependent hate civil war happening inside of you with depression. And then you have the Stockholm syndrome and the psychological entrapment. And that is coming in from the beliefs and the perspective and the PTSD. So how this works basically is, so Stockholm syndrome, by the way, Stockholm syndrome and psychological entrapment are the same thing. Really, they are. So if I were to put, I'm going to put addiction here, but it's not just addiction, because cutters are here. Addiction, cutters, and eating disorders are here. And these three people, those three categories, are a first perspective, lack of ability to self-regulate, and they are trying to feel in control. This is their problem with control. Narcissism is also actually very similar to that. That is another form of trying to control. Now, borderline personality disorder is not about control, not at all. So narcissism is actually related to addiction, cutters, and eating disorders. Narcissism projects, addiction, cutter, eater internalizes. That's it. One of them internalizes the control, the other projects the control. Psychological entrapment, Stockholm syndrome, is the invasive perspective. That's all that is invasive perspective. And that is borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder. That is a subcategory of borderline, a side effect of borderline personality disorder. And then depression is your self-civil war, where you've just internalized 100%. There you go. So I am a firm believer that there's only like 4 mental disorders, because every time I look at mental disorders and I break them down, I'm going, okay, well, that's just this, that just, yeah. Schizophrenia, that's one that people bring up a lot to me. Like, what's schizophrenia? Yeah, schizophrenia is a hodgepodge of like 3 of these things. That's it. It's literally just a hodgepodge. It's a cocktail. Once you start realizing, like, bipolar is a cocktail. So it's bullshit. Instead of actually diagnosing PTSD, ADHD, and borderline personality disorder, they slap bipolar onto it to bypass the other diagnosis, because insurance companies acknowledge the existence of bipolar, but they don't acknowledge the existence of borderline personality disorder or narcissistic abuse syndrome. So, yeah. But borderline, codependence, narcissism. Now, codependence is not an actual psychological disorder. It's the name for the relationship between borderline and narcissism. So codependence is just this beautiful umbrella. You have a codependent relationship, you know. And yeah, so it really comes down to PTSD. Now, PTSD, yeah, PTSD. PTSD is so amazing to me, the way it works. It's like a generic fit all. And then you've got, yeah, your addiction, your cutter, your eaters. Those are all about internalizing control. Narcissism is about projecting control. Borderline has nothing to do with control. That's just your slave mind. That is 100% slave mind. And that goes hand in hand with Stockholm syndrome and psychological entrapment. So technically speaking, Stockholm syndrome and psychological entrapment is a, yeah, let me go ahead and do this. And that, like I said, I can see how it's all, so let me go ahead and do this. This is actually quite fun. I don't think I've had this much fun in a while. So when you have codependence, yeah, it's definitely a train. You have borderline, and then you have narcissism, which comes down to, do you internalize or do you project? Internalize or do you project? And that's control. Okay, so if you have a problem with control, you get into narcissism, and then you get into the addiction or cutting or eating disorders. That is all projecting your control. And then that's codependence. Yeah. And that leads into depression. So you have depression over here, which is when you internalize your own control. And borderline breaks off into Stockholm syndrome. And that is your slave mind. Slave mind. And that's because you had the definition of love compromised. And we also refer to this as the empath. And that's when if you are an empath, you have a type of borderline. Slave mind, yeah, that's all there. And then the narcissism is about projecting control. Whereas with depression, you have the addiction, the cutting, the eating. That is internalizing the control. Borderline also internalizes. The narcissist is 100% the projector of control. In fact, narcissism is the only projector of control. All right, now, That's it. And then there's PTSD. And yes, this is exactly how I view all mental disorders. Like it's all this beautiful little simple umbrella. And every time I talk to anybody and it breaks it down, it's the exact same formula over and over again. The problem is there's a lot of noise and garbage, and they keep creating more and more names for shit. And it's like, why are you complicating it? So I leave them to their insanity. So you have the codependent cycle, and then you have depression. And depression is literally a grief of the self. And it is you're dealing with the first and the second perspective that's missing. With borderline, you have the toxic belief. Your definition of love equals being needed. And yes, that is linked to rejection and abandonment. Narcissism is love equals needing people to control. Love equals needing people. Love also means letting me use you, literally. Let me use you. That is what love means to the narcissist, which is why they say things like, well, I'm your mother. Well, don't you love me? That is the narcissist, because they think that love means letting me use you. They believe this. This is their core definition of love that they don't understand. This is why I say a narcissist literally has no idea what love is, but neither does the borderline, neither does the empath, because the empath thinks that love is being needed. So a narcissist or an empath will go around with this beacon. Love means being needed. Who needs me? Who needs me? Who needs me? And the narcissist is walking around with a beacon going, I need to use you. I need to use you. I need to use you. Oh, I need you. And the empath will go, wait, I need to be needed. And they say, well, I need you. Boom, match made in heaven. Right? So that's why empaths keep attracting narcissists, and that's why narcissists keep attracting empaths. It's because you have the opposite of the definition of love messed up. And then the Stockholm syndrome is actually a type of borderline. PTSD is a standalone, and that also contributes to ADHD. If you have ADHD, you have PTSD every time. PTSD does not mean you have ADHD. You can have PTSD, and a more developed stage of PTSD is ADHD. Documentation is out there, research it. Teal Swan does a lot of work with that. ADD is another form of it. I believe that it goes PTSD and then PTSD with ADD and then PTSD with ADHD. I think it's that. I think ADHD is like level 3 of PTSD. And ADD is level 2 of PTSD, and PTSD is level 1 of PTSD. My daughter has level 3 of PTSD. I have level 2 of PTSD. My son, it looks like, has level 1 of PTSD. I think. I'm still watching him for that. So yeah, those are your different levels. That's PTSD, ADHD, and ADD. And let me see here. And it's shrinking, by the way. It's the shrinking that causes the ADHD. Shrinking is very much if you just assume that that's shrinking, that's PTSD. It's when you have to shrink and you have to constantly make yourself smaller. So depending upon how much you have to make yourself smaller to avoid the abuse, depends on how much you are containing and condensing your energy so that you'll contain it so much that you'll walk around shaking. Which means he also has PTSD, he has ADHD, and he has depression from self-loathing. Let me check to see if he shut down. He shut down. Yep, he shut down. Okay. All right. Talking about it triggers some people so that even talking about this, they shut down. So stonewalling, and now you have your defense, you have your fear system defense. The fear system defense is all of the different types that you have. You have your, fight. fight and flight. But again, that's so wrong because fight is actually not a fear response. That's actually an anger defense response. You're supposed to fight. That is stage 1 of the anger cycle. It's beautiful. You want stage 3, but fighting is actually stage 3, or I'm sorry, stage 1 of the defense cycle. Now, if your defense is down, you're not going to fight. You're going to flee, is run away. That's actually a boundary setting, and that is stage 3 of the anger stage. So, fight and flee are actually phenomenal. That is defense and that is working. You're supposed to run away. Fight means you're at stage 1, fleeing is stage 3. No one runs away because no one's using boundaries. So, the flip side of that is your fear system. Now, your fear system does not use fight or flight. That's your defense system. That is your boundaries. That's anger. Anger is a beautiful thing. Your fear system doesn't get angry. If it did, it wouldn't be afraid. It would defend itself. It would use boundaries and everything would be fine. So the fear system it flops and it fawns. Flop is the shutdown. It is stonewalling. It happens to people who were abused at a very young age. It is a defense mechanism. It is dissociation. That is flopping. You're dissociating. Fawning is the chameleon response. I fucking hate it. This is mine. I fucking hate it. It's when you smile and you laugh while you're being abused. And it's the chameleon response. It's the can't beat 'em, join 'em. It is very common for borderlines to use. I used to fight. I used to fight right up until I ended up with multiple personality disorder, 8 years old. I used to fight. And then I had that one horrific trauma event that switched it over to fawning. And so I played along because I had a gun pointed at me. So, yeah, there you go. So now I fawn and I play along. So that's really it. And dissociation happens with a flop. Now, people think that that's stonewalling, and that's not. Stonewalling is a bully term that we attach to people who have a significant problem with system shutdown. Blackouts, that blackouts are experienced by people who flop. So you have your fear system response and you have your defense system response. So when you have your defense system response, that's when you fight or you flee. You're supposed to flee. That is when you assert change to keep yourself safe. That's good. No one does that. The flip side of that is when your defense doesn't work, so your fear system kicks on, and then you flop, you go into a full system shutdown, or you fawn, you chameleon, you disguise yourself as the enemy to get through whatever you need to get through. That's the fawning. PTSD is the shrinking, and you have 3 levels of shrinking. The first level is just PTSD. The second level is when you get ADD with that. The third level is when you get ADHD with that. And that is shrinking. You cannot have ADHD without PTSD. You can have a PTSD without ADHD. Every person who was diagnosed with ADHD has been traumatized. That's a fact. ADHD is a mental disorder and a subgenre of PTSD. Incompetent research really needs to be followed up on. Take a look at Teal Swan's research. She's also a psychologist. She knows her shit. Now, that's the shrinking. Now you have the depression, which is its whole other little creature. There's so much there there's a lot there. And then you've got your basic codependence. Your codependence falls into 2 categories. You have your narcissist and your borderline personality disorder. Your narcissist projects control. Your borderline internalizes everything. This is about responsibility, by the way. This is what this is. This is when you have a problem with responsibility, an imbalance of responsibility. That is when you get codependency. That is what's going on with borderline personality disorder and narcissism. And then Stockholm syndrome, that's the slave mind, that's psychological entrapment. That's a symptom of borderline personality disorder. And empath is actually borderline personality disorder, but insurance companies don't like diagnosing that because they don't believe it exists. Well, they're experts on this. And then narcissists project to seek control. And both of those are tied down to the false belief love means being needed or love means letting me use you. Now, in the area of addiction, that is internalizing the need for control. And that is where we get into that self-loathing, self-hating. And that is over-internalization. That is also an offshoot of depression. People who suffer from depression almost always also suffer with addiction, cutting, or eating disorders. Now, if you have borderline personality disorder, you can also, in fact, it's very common to have problems with addiction, cutting, eating disorder because you're internalizing. That's a symptom of borderline personality disorder. And depression is also a symptom of borderline personality disorder. So depression is really when the self develops a codependent cycle within itself, which you can do in addition to having your codependent on the outside. So you have your relationship with the narcissist. So you've got borderline personality disorder and you've got the narcissist, and the two of you have a codependent relationship. Now, within inside each of those, each person can also have their own internalized civil war, hence the depression, which also can and will most likely lead to the addiction, the cutting, and the eating disorder. So really, it just keeps coming back to that codependence, PTSD, and then the imbalance of your fight or flight. Again, bipolar, I believe bipolar is actually PTSD, ADHD, and depression with borderline. And this is why. It's because when you have an ADHD episode that's hyper-focused and you have depression, you're going to experience these long bouts of hyper-focus, hyper-manic. That's the ADHD at work. And then boom, the depression kicks in. And so you're actually jumping between your depression and your ADHD. That is what I believe bipolar is. That's why I believe bipolar is garbage, is because bipolar is a misdiagnosis of depression and ADHD. In every case that somebody is diagnosed with bipolar that I have seen, they were not diagnosed with ADHD. They don't take that into account, which is the problem. And every person with bipolar does have PTSD. So I believe that bipolar is just depression and ADHD, which is why you have those height states of manic, that's your ADHD, with the low stems of depression. So I don't believe bipolar exists. Schizophrenia is a hodgepodge of depression, borderline, and narcissism all combined. Schizophrenia has like all of them in one person. You can have borderline and narcissism together. I believe that's schizophrenia. But again, people are creating new shit instead of just looking at the old stuff. They're complicating it. Yeah, I think it really comes down to just borderline narcissism, and you have your two codependents there. And this is the beautiful part. If you look at the 6 stages of ethics, it's just a lack of some of the stages. For instance, depression, you lack the first stage. You can't self-regulate. You also lack resourcefulness, the second stage. Narcissism, you lack the third stage. You are incapable of trusting or knowing your own limitations. So the narcissist is the third stage. Borderline, you are losing 1 and 3. Definitely, yeah, 2 also. Yeah. So with borderline, you are losing 1, 2, and 3, the first 3 stages of ethics. Yeah, that's it. And you're yeah, no, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. PTSD is basically your fear system. That's actually linked to your fight or flight response, your fear system response. PTSD is just a defense I mean, this is all defense. Yeah. So it's depression, borderline, narcissism. Suicidal ideation is a side effect of depression. It's not in addition to, it's just another stage or another level of it. So yeah, what else is there? Multiple personality disorder. Multiple personality disorder is so much fun. There's a lot of work I have not disclosed with multiple personality disorder. That is a defense response where you are literally chopping up pieces of the identity and the defense and burying them inside your subconscious mind to keep parts of you safe that's not being allowed or accepted. That's what multiple personality disorder is. You're actually breaking off bits of your own conscious mind and severing it up into pieces. It's not a type of dissociation, not at all. Dissociation is just the fearing, it's the flop and the fawning. It's specifically the flopping. It's the total shutdown, which is now, see, it's not even part of depression. It's absolutely a fear response. So dissociation is just another fear response. It's an extreme form of flopping or all system failure shutdown. Yeah. And that is where they really fucked up my diagnosis, is they told me that my imagination was my dissociation. So that when I'm cured now, I'm looking at it going, why do I still have an imagination? By that definition, all children have multiple personality disorder. All children have dissociative identity disorder or dissociation, because all children imagine. It's ridiculous, the shit they told me about it. We know almost nothing about multiple personality disorder because you have to be inside your head and know psychology and have the ability to articulate all the shit that happened inside of your head. And the people who end up with multiple personality disorder, most of them can't pull that off. So there's a lot of outside people guessing as to what's going on inside the mind. I really need to sit down and write it all down because I'm one of the few people who've had both, have had it, have recovered from it, and have the psychology to sit down and break it down to show you this is what happened. And it's really just, it's not dissociation at all. It was breaking down bits of my own of my own identity into pieces, the pieces that were rejected to keep me safe. So it was actually a severing of my conscious awareness and a rejection of the identity. It was self-attack, self-assault, which actually ties into depression. It tied into depression. It was self-war. Oh, this part's unwanted. I'll just throw that part of me away. But you can't throw yourself away. And I didn't do it as a defense mechanism to keep me safe. It was also, back to that first perspective, the concept that I didn't believe I could take care of myself, which we're back to the first and second perspective again, of not being able to self-regulate, not believing that I could do something, that resourcefulness again. And it went away. It integrated when I realized I don't need them anymore. I can take care of myself. Once I had that realization, the integration occurred completely. So yeah, that is my mental illness chart. And it keeps going back to those toxic beliefs. Depression's toxic belief, the illogical fallacy with depression is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Hopelessness. It is also a belief that I can't. I have no control. That's what it is. I cannot control this. I can't. That's really right there. Depression's core belief is I can't. I can't do it. I can't do it. Now, if you look at the third perspective, which is I accept my own limitations and I do need help, I trust that people will help me. So I can allow for my own shortcomings to ask for help and rely on people. This is why the third perspective requires so much trust in others and acceptance of your own limitations. If you don't learn this lesson, if you don't internalize this ethical lesson at age 3, you're never going, this is where perfectionism comes from and people pleasing. This is it right here, is because people pleasing basically allows you to, well, that's actually first perspective. What it does is it allows you to accept your own limitations so that you can fail. But if you don't learn that with the third perspective, it's never going to take off. So with depression, it's you got to believe you can do it. But you've got all the substantial evidence that says, literally proof of concept that says, oh, I can't do it. Yes, you can do it. Absolutely, you can do it. And the reason why you can do it is because you are assuming that you can't learn. So depression kicks in. I can't change. I can't learn. I can't control. So I can't is the primary toxic belief of grief and of depression. It is a limiting belief of the self. Whereas with borderline personality disorder or an empath, they believe that love equals being needed. And with a narcissist, they believe that love means let me use you, being needed, or I'm sorry, needing other people, which is why they say things like, you won't let me use you. Don't you love me? Because they really believe that love equals letting you use me, or letting me use you, letting the narcissist need people. PTSD, that's downright just that's not a belief. PTSD is not a limiting belief at all. That is conditioning. That is 100% conditioning. That is repetition. That is Pavlov's dog at work. That is what PTSD is. Pavlov's dog at work. Okay, so here's how this works. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically reconditioning. It's using classical conditioning, a type of brainwashing, to reverse PTSD. That is exactly what cognitive behavioral therapy does. It's phenomenal. It's beautiful. It's meditation, positive affirmation meets pausing and expanding the reaction time so that you can step in mindfully, consciously, and redirect your trauma response. That's cognitive behavioral therapy. It's all over the internet. You can Google it and get some worksheets. It's phenomenal. Now, the other side of that is dialectical behavioral therapy. Dialectical behavioral therapy would be needed for depression, addiction, borderline personality, and narcissism. Dialectical behavioral therapy targets the limiting belief using logic because you are removing the logical fallacy. When you remove the logical fallacy, the limiting belief, it literally unhooks your mental disorder and it releases it because you've proven your mental illness illogical. And that's what's holding you to it, is the lack of definition of love, either with borderline personality or narcissism. And with depression, it's going to be your view of yourself, which again fuels back to that first, second, and third perspective. So, and then you've got your fear response all going haywire with your dissociation, your fear flop, your shutdown. Yeah, that's all playing a part of it. So really, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just 5 mental situations. So if you can break down all 5 mental situations, yeah, it's so systematic. This is so systematic. This is so simple, really simple. In simplicity, there is truth. Sir Isaac Newton. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here, and then I'm going to clean up my diagrams to make them look pretty. Thank you so much. If you love shit like this, like, subscribe, follow, comment below. Let me know what part of the show resonated with you. And if you want to learn more, take a look at my link tree. Thank you so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.